Welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Mueller. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, author and trans widow Uta Hagen stops in to chat with John. They're going to chat about, well, the methodical ways in which trans widows are ultimately being influenced and silenced by agenda-driven professionals. Let's head straight in with John right now. John, thanks for being here today. Take it away.
Brad, thank you as always. We do have back in studio, as it were, Uta Hagen. She is now a repeat guest because her story is not only so compelling, but it's so relevant with what's going on, because this is really where we see the fallout of the trans deception, the trans movement, right? They want to focus on all sorts of issues dealing with men in drag, what's going on in schools. We cover all of that. But the one thing they don't want to cover, those that are advocating and pushing this grand ruse, is the actual fallout in terms of real lives and real life. There's no other way to put it, real life survivors. And Uta is she's a widow, a trans widow, as the term is called, and it's so appropriately termed as such because there are so many layers of grief and loss, Uta, that you've had to go through. It would have been easier had your husband just died.
Well,
I'll put it right out there, right? This is a living death, and not just a living death, but it is a betrayal of the greatest kind, the most profound order. There's so many layers to this. We started to cover some in the past episodes that you've been on with us. And we will no doubt continue to have to unpack the various layers, because not only was your husband, who you thought was going to be your lifelong partner, not only was he unfaithful, but he was unfaithful with other men. So there's a whole nother layer to it. He then turned into somebody you didn't even recognize, but probably the reality is he was somebody you didn't recognize. He started to, and that's the big question. Did he change, or was he this way all along? And again, no one ultimately knows that answer, because we'd have to go to the original source. And to what extent can we trust someone who has been a grand schemer and liar? And so, Uta, thank you for coming back on with us.
well, thank you, John. And I do have a sense that most of us trans widows, we feel as though certainly our male partner buried his own male self. And this problematic individual who is still male, but calls himself female, and co-opts a great deal of our own identity, our own details, our style of attire, and our mode of communication, and so on. It feels like you're being haunted. I've heard that from many, many of us trans widows. And what we talked about for today's topic is a continuation of my narrative. This would have been in April of 1995, right after the night before my younger son's 4th birthday. I realized.
Now, Uta, what you're going to be bringing up right now is a continuation of your most recent episode with us. So I encourage people to be brought up to speed on what you're going to, really the context, what you're going to be discussing now. Go back, review Uta's past recordings with us, because it's heart-wrenching what you went through. And then, lo and behold, you find this supposed therapist who's working with your husband, and talk to us about what you uncovered.
Right. Well, I discovered through his the way his chest looked, the little buds of breasts, I realized, he must have been taking estrogen for some months. And so it's this moment when you realize, another betrayal. And in a way, since I had kind of lived with this roller coaster of his identity indecision for more than 2 years, there was even a little sense of relief. Like I knew that, okay, now I'm going to say no. Now we have gone beyond what I will consider tolerating. And I had previously told him, if you do this again, if you have this secret life again, then that's the end for us. I had been very matter of fact about that. So nevertheless, after that night and after that little birthday party where I walk around kind of in shock, but pasting a smile on my face as we decorated our cupcakes, then the next week or two, when he was coming home from work, he was, after the children went to bed, he would start to work on me and say, but we don't have to get divorced. That's why I chose to go to Ruth and Dr. Connie, because they are specialists in helping the families to stay together. And it doesn't mean we have to get divorced. And I'm sort of saying, this was something that I made a very firm announcement about a long time ago. And he was being really quite irrational and immature for I think he was about 36, and he has 3 Ivy League, master's degree type degrees and stuff. And I felt like, I did feel like I'm really now dealing with this new person. I don't know him. This is someone who has, well, first of all, he's on estrogen, right? He's a man on estrogen. And I think it's affecting his thinking. Clearly, the path that he is on, which I know that he described as, I'm on the Blanchard protocols.
Now, Uta, would you describe for the viewers that are unfamiliar with what you just referenced, the Blanchard protocols?
Okay, so the Blanchard protocols were the path that Dr. Ray Blanchard, who is a Canadian PhD psychologist, sexologist, I don't think he's a psychiatrist, he had a whole program where he supervised men like Nettie. And his big deal in his protocols was that they have to keep their job. They have to get a letter from their employer that states that this person has been dressing and appearing as the opposite sex consistently for 2 years. And Ray Blanchard, I saw him in an interview, and he was very, very proud that he wouldn't keep somebody on his track if they lost their job. So he was kind of proving, these guys are really functional, they're responsible. And what I see as a real blind spot is the fact that all he's said in the interviews I've seen with him about women like me, the wives, is, the wives don't like it. It's like, okay,
oh heavens,
the understatement.
So that's the only issue. Is that what he's saying?
We have to ask him. However, and this attitude really permeates the whole field. And I've actually recently decided I call this cultivated sexologist mystique. This is all part of their schema that they're going.
Uta, I have seen this. What you're describing now is ringing a bell. It's like, wait a second, you're really onto something, because number one, I have concerns. I'll put it right out there. I've never said it publicly, not just because it hasn't come up. I have. What's a guy doing going into the field of sexology?
Right.
I just want to throw that out. Now, I'm aware of the fact that there's plenty of individuals in the field who have higher degrees than I am. But now that I'm thinking about it, I have seen overall, especially on their social media posting, these guys are pretty deviant. They're very deviant, as a matter of fact. They justify, James Cantor, sorry, I think he took his Facebook posts down, but I took screenshots of all it. It's the most deviant stuff.
Right. Right. So there's this group. There might be one more. What I remember is Blanchard, Zucker, and Cantor and Bailey. Blanchard, Zucker,
Well,
Cantor.
Bailey's
Bailey.
another one that he and I had dealings with. A
Oh,
very
really?
deviant individual.
Yes. Right. So
All right, let me qualify that in case if somebody doesn't know John Bailey, I think he used to go by Michael Bailey.
Michael Bailey. Yeah.
Okay. So he was a professor, a sexologist out of Northwestern University.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I heard about his name, I was researching the effects of College Sex Week on the rates of sexual assault on campus. Well, that was in general, but then I focused on Northwestern. Well, the rates of course, just like they will on any campus, they'll go up. You start bringing in deviant sexual displays, and if you change the milieu of the campus, you're going to invite sexual predators. Well, lo and behold, there's a story about a sexologist who has, after one of his lectures, so it was voluntary apparently, but
Mm-hmm.
he announced to his class, well, yeah, everybody sticks around. They want to see this. So there's a demonstration that's going to happen with a supposed sex toy. Okay.
Oh.
This was live, right? And so so after class, now it's voluntary, in walks a woman and a man. The woman disrobes, lays down on the table or something. Here goes this guy with a hack saw.
Oh.
Puts a dildo on the end of it and inserts it in the woman and powers it up. And he calls it the F. The actual says the name, F saw. Well,
wow.
Okay, yeah, a tad bit of controversy, and I think eventually he left the university. But of course, me working in a prison.
No, he might still be at Northwestern.
Okay, but me working in a prison,
yeah.
What does that conjure to mind? Right, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and stuff. Anybody that's going to put a power tool inside a woman, you're dealing with a very deviant man. Yeah. So you're saying that Blanchard and Cantor and Zucker, okay, and Bailey, they all kind of know one another.
I believe so. Yes, I believe they lecture at the same conferences.
Bailey did have a lot of their postings on his social media page.
Yes, I call them the Four Musketeers. Yes. So, and what the trickle down from all that, it's very interesting because there's a direct link to the appointment with Nettie's non-certified therapist, in quotes, whom I call Ruth the Charlatan in my memoir, in the Curated Woods.
There you go, right? We've got, I have a copy of it here in the Curated
yes.
Woods.
Yes, and it's not all about, not all about the sex deviance and all the trauma. It's also about healing, and it's about nature and so on.
That was your work that you completed as you were processing your trauma of betrayal.
Yes. So I realized that because Nettie is coming home after these Ruth appointments, telling me this other narrative of what I really need to do, because it's just my traditional old-fashioned background that is causing me to have the wrong mindset, and why I'm just not open.
There it is. You're just not open-minded enough.
Marriage and just, like doing sanctioned gaslighting, right? Sanctioned telling me a narrative that is completely false of what I must be thinking, and I'm just this regular woman. I was pretty in touch with my body, had done dance and lots of athletic things since I was 14. And I just always felt, really positive about, active intimacy, active, fulfilling intimacy in a monogamous relationship. That's basically, in different words, what my parents, that was the talk from my parents. So I said, can you sign the form, because I need to go see Ruth. Okay. I need to go see, I call her Ruth the Charlatan. I did find out her looked up my records and I found out her last name, but I have a feeling she might be dead by now, because I did try to find her, see if she's still in practice. But I think judging by how old she seemed then, she's probably no longer with us or in a nursing home or something like that. But so I call her Ruth the Charlatan, and as if her middle name was the with a capital T. So I go in to this studio, rather well-appointed studio, just northeast of Grand Central Station, just conveniently for all those suburban men like Nettie who might need to go have an appointment with her after they've done a little bit of cross-dressing and then quick zip out, back out to the suburbs or whatever on the train.
Uta, remind for the viewers that may have forgotten, Ruth the Charlatan was married to who?
Oh, I believe well, she was married to a doctor, and it might have been an endocrinologist. So I think that they kind of had this joint, convenient little enterprise of her recruiting men like my husband, who have lots of confusion and who, might have, as in the case of my ex-husband, might have had childhood experiences of physical abuse, which Nettie did have from his father, rather extreme, or, sexual abuse or neglect or, abandonment, all those grief, all those factors, which the detransitioners are telling us wasn't dealt with. But so let me proceed, because we can always go off on tangents, but let me proceed with my famous 50 minutes with Ruth. And I had to go buy an outfit to wear because my clothes were so ratty that I was embarrassed. And I had to, I remember I figured out, an inexpensive dress and a jacket. And I know it was in April of 1995. So, she's got these little dogs and she's got the incense burning, and it's this very, it's got an atmosphere, this place of hers. And she asks me if I want to have one of the little dogs on my lap. And I'm sort of like, no, I'm sorry, I have allergies. And I'm just really here so that, you aren't talking about me with Nettie, because I have this feeling that Nettie is telling you wishful thinking about me. And I really want you to hear it from, let's say, the horse's mouth. Okay. Like I'm just plain Jane, the girl next door. I think I said that to her, literally. And the thing is, she didn't really start off the way a normal therapist would start off, in my experience, which is that this must be really devastating for you. How are you doing? She launched into a presentation which seemed unusually well rehearsed, and it seemed like on the Bob Barker game show stage that she was showing me doors number 1 through 5 on, that she just wanted me to agree to try this out. Don't reject him. Don't, just give this a try. People are staying together, and it all kind of dovetails with the Oprah Winfrey shows. She had some of these people on. And so basically these men with their confused sexual identities were clickbait for everybody, right?
And
right?
people need to understand right now, because you've highlighted a point that's really important, because people will attempt to assert that those that are trying to work with kids that are confused are foisting their values upon someone. A therapist is to be values neutral. We're not there to craft someone in our image. We're there to help someone figure out their own values, as well as to empathize with someone. If we have an agenda, so if a therapist has an agenda, they are not fulfilling the basic responsibility of a therapist. And what you're saying is, you came into this therapist and it seems like she had both a script, and therefore she had an agenda for you.
Yes. So door number 1 was, you're going to stay. And very much going back to that weird, bizarre Michael Bailey lecture incident, she tells me with a sly look on her face, Well, there are things that the wives do. Just let me tell you about the wives who are staying, because there are a lot more who are staying, and there's somebody over in Queens, and I could put you in touch with her. And there's just a few little, spicy things that you might watch, and little, she didn't call them sex toys, things. You can get things. There are these things that you can get that will help you, because, these couples who stay together, they just are trying out different things in their intimate relationship.
So she was trying to persuade you in
Yes.
terms of your
Absolutely.
own moral values.
Yes. And I said to her, this is why I have to be here, Ruth, because I have to explain to you that I was a serious dancer from the age of 14 until 28. And I have a BFA in dance, and I had to quit because of injuries, but I took ballet and modern dance and several other dance forms very seriously. And even in, when I was still dancing in 1980s in New York City, I was in the technique classes of some of the top dancers from the top modern dance companies, even some ballet companies, even people from Joffrey Ballet, even people from, there was Bill T. Jones. You won't know all these names, but in the modern dance world, Merce Cunningham, the Paul Taylor Company, I was in that athletic, artistic milieu with some of the most beautiful female bodies in the world. And I wasn't attracted to the females. And I just said, so I know that you might think, like Nettie's been saying to me, everyone is a little bit bisexual, which I know now goes way back to Alfred Kinsey, the child molester, so-called researcher. But so she, although she herself appears to be married to a male doctor and appears to, be a heterosexual woman, she kind of was implying that this intimacy between two heterosexual people, if you're not trying out, watching some pornography or special equipment, then you're really not having a fulfilled life. Okay. But I kind of put a stop to that because what I understand, she didn't go into real lot of details about the role play that was going to be demanded of me. But I know this from other trans widows that I've had direct contact with, is that the husband says that he wants the wife to fulfill him by pretending to be a man while he's pretending to be a woman. Yeah. So
And
then
notice how it's all about fulfill the guy.
Oh, I know.
It's just
I know.
feeding this abject narcissism.
Right. And she implied something like, and I wish I had a tape recording of this, but she implied something like, you're 34 now, and how long have you been married? Oh, since you were 21. Things do start to get a little stale. You might want to spice things up with these, people do that. Couples do that. They're doing that. And I have this other wife who's staying, who she said, she's willing to join me in my recruiting of you if you want help with this. And I was just like, I there was a part of me that really wanted to wring her neck and hang her by her heels out of the fancy casement window. But no, I don't wish violence on any of these people. I just think that they need to be exposed. And I think that their crazy ideas need to be, discussed realistically, right? Because I find that whole idea demeaning. I find that completely demeaning. I don't have any problems talking about sex. I really don't. I read this book called Our Bodies and Ourselves when I was 18, and I was a natural girl and stuff like that. I can talk, quite clinically. I used to read some of Dr. Ruth and stuff, but the pornography thing, because I know about being in touch with my body and stuff, I've always thought pornography is really quite vile, and typically is coercing, it's coercive, it's exploitative. That's how I feel about it. It's the same as prostitution as far as I'm concerned. And so, that balloon that she tried to float out there kind of sank. The next balloon was that a lot of people are trying out open marriage. And Nettie is willing. She's triangulating here.
Nettie's willing. He's willing to be
Nettie's
unfaithful.
willing. And it's like,
that's big of him.
The thought bubble above my head is, okay, because Ruth, he's already been practicing open marriage,
right.
Okay. And I said, well, I feel that the children suddenly are not the priority in the family. If the couple is all about having an open marriage and letting, having a weekend. And I said, I'm sorry, but when I was a dancer, there were, I could start saying, oh, I kind of regret that, but there were these musicians who kind of liked my, old, 26-year-old dancer body. And they would proposition me, basically. And I would point to my wedding ring and say, I'm married. And for me, that is marriage. I'm not a pole dancer, right? I was a modern dancer who studied ballet very seriously and stuff. I was not an exotic dancer or something like this. I mean, people just sometimes they misunderstand, right? And I mean, almost all professional dancers have had experiences of men, stalking them after a concert, after a performance and stuff like that. So I had a little bit of that when I was dancing with a little company and stuff. And so, I was clearly not the woman who is interested in open marriage. I actually didn't see a lot of promiscuity going on, to tell you the truth, in the modern dance world back in the 1980s, which is a real heyday of that performance art. Although the men, the homosexual men were quite promiscuous, the male dancers, and unfortunately a lot of them got AIDS. I went through some grief in the 1980s when important teachers that I admired unfortunately had contracted AIDS and died. So but okay, then, since I'm not interested in door number 1 or door number 2, Ruth brings up door number 3, which is that we'll commit to a monogamous marriage. It's like,
isn't that interesting?
So mixed up. You've just entered the set of a Fellini film. Suddenly you're walking around with clowns and stuff in Fellini's Satyricon.
So
right?
if you're still really stuck on this monogamous marriage.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're so old-fashioned. And at the end of the session, she called me traditional and spunky. And it's like, it's pretty judgmental and kind of diminishing for her to say that. But I sort of felt like I wanted to say back to her, words that my mother wouldn't want me to say. I'll take it. I'll take traditional and spunky. There's nothing wrong with that. So in the closed monogamous marriage, which maybe is going to be sexless, since I'm not agreeing to do the fulfilling stuff that I don't know how he's going to get that. Maybe he's just going to watch porn. I don't know. But what I just need to do is I just would need to, fulfill him by going shopping with him while he's dressed up. And I just thought, oh yeah, and he'll buy all the clothes. I said, I can't see myself getting anything out of this for me because, he had a second wardrobe unbeknownst to me that he comes dressed up in to see you. So like, you don't understand. I've been cooking lentil soup and pea soup at home, and I've been wearing my old pregnancy clothes. Like, I don't like, this is new. This is the first new thing I've had in years. And I don't, I can't go. I have sisters. I don't need another sister. Okay. So door number 3, boom, Uta slammed shut door number 3. Door number 4. I just need to tolerate that he goes off on some weekends. Okay. And I really don't know what he's doing. And he's going to have this suitcase, the Sam Brinton suitcase. We didn't know who he was. He probably wasn't even born back then. But so he, I would just have to not go nosing in his things. And he's just going to go off on some trip. And again, I'm like, okay, with what money? Like, I want a new pair of shoes. With what money?
That's right. With what money, and the fact that you're his wife, and the fact that he's got kids.
Right.
So it's
And
basically allow him to be as adulterous. There's an old-fashioned term called adultery. Allow him to be as unfaithful as he so desires.
Well, but she was saying, but he'll promise. Like, so
there we go. The guy that promised to be faithful. He promises
that he wouldn't get into, sexual things, but he just needs to
That's right.
have this. And I it's like, okay, I read his diaries. He called himself a transsexual. It was in his own writing. Like, I just felt like, lady, I've already, lived through 2 years of uncertainty. Okay. So Uta slams shut door number 4. And door number 5 it's kind of like number 2, open marriage. But Nettie will tolerate if you need more of a male, masculine, sexual partner. And then the picture that goes in my head, not from anything except kind of horrible movies or something, I'm saying to myself, oh, he's going to want to like watch, or he's like, and I just felt like, where are the ethics and the morals here? Because there were men when I was a dancer who let me know that they were infatuated with me. Right. And I just felt like, look, what if it turns out that with some other man, Nettie was my only sexual partner since all of my life. I didn't have a lot of boyfriends in high school, and I just sort of felt like, well, this man will fall in love with me. And then, well, also then I could be accused of infidelity, and I could be the bad guy in the divorce. And then she gets through that, and I'm like, okay, maybe she's got doors number 6, 7, and 8, or 147 pronouns or something. I don't know. But I was like, okay, can we talk about my children? My children are 5 and 8. No, my children are 4 and 7. And, they don't know anything about this, but they know we went away for a while, and then I came back, and they know that I'm not quite myself all the time. I don't know if they know that I sometimes disappear into the shower and try to cry silently. I don't think my children know that, because I'm trying to hide the extreme stress that I'm under. I mean, clearly I can talk about this now 30 years later with a certain sense of humor and stuff, because if you don't see the humor in it, then I think you're lost. You've got to get out of there while you still have your sense of humor. And there was a person that I consulted actually at the beginning of this stuff in 1992, who was a PhD psychologist working at the Gay and Lesbian Resource Center on 13th Street in Manhattan. And at that time, the T and the Q hadn't come into that center and taken over. And I just, I went to find out information and stuff. And she was a pretty savvy lesbian, PhD psychologist. And she said, these guys are very narcissistic. He's going to try to take over your life. They come into these lesbian groups and they take over. We're really sick of them. This is 1992 that she's saying this. This is very interesting. I mean, so, I don't know. I think she must have gotten silenced, because these men who somehow managed to have their careers. Nettie's very successful. Claimed later that he lost his job, but he didn't. He tried to start his own company. All that. I mean, it's so out of whack and so off balance. So, and this I know from the trans widows that I am currently in touch with through my Uta Hagen YouTube channel and my WordPress blog, utahagengrasswidow.wordpress.com, I know that these very same warped and concocted odd sexual scenarios are being suggested. And I think it's even more so because, at the time in the early 1990s, we didn't have like a home computer or something like that. So I really have no idea about, exposure to pornography that my husband had. I don't know. He certainly could have been getting print porn sent to a post office box or his work address or something. But I feel on one level, though, that from what I know now from gay men who have described what goes on in the gay bars, where it's very strong culturally, very heavy duty homosexual male culture, I am aware that the gay bars that Nettie was going to in drag, that, the men are, it's like a sex club kind of. They're walking around
That's exactly what it is.
without pants on. The women's room isn't open to any woman who wanders in needing to use the toilet. It's a scene, right? And like I said, I have had wonderful gay people in my life. I don't ask about their personal lives. Professionally, I've known, many gay men. I don't think all of them want to be promiscuous. I think there are monogamous relationships, certainly between lesbian women and gay men. However, there is a culture in the gay milieu that is very out there, very open, very raw. An old lady like me who is so spunky and traditional is going to say it's pretty oversexed. I think it's oversexed.
Well, I would go so far as to say, if you're urinating on each other, they call them golden showers. If you do all sorts of defecating and other multiple partners per night, that's a deviant lifestyle in that,
right.
Those that are going into that. So, Uta, I'm aware of the time.
Yes.
Would you be willing to stay with us, and we'll pick up this point in part 2 of this episode?
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot more we need to get into, especially you highlighting how that really the field of psychology that is available to unfaithful men,
yes,
right, that are wanting to find justification for leaving their spouses and their families, that
right.
there's the whole thing is warped in terms of it is the wives. You've already described it, but there's probably more we need to look at. The pressure the wives are being given or placed upon them. And then, as you just started to indicate, there is no thought for the kids. There's no thought for the repercussions and the fallout. So I want to get into that. You have lived that. And I think that'll be very important for people to know, for people to, because the narrative has been painted that these are sensitive guys that are just misunderstood and they're trying to find themselves and they're coming into their own true inner person, instead of painting them as unfaithful, the unfaithful men that they are, that they've walked out on their wives. They expect their wives to sit there and tolerate infidelity. They have abandoned and abdicated what they promised. Yes. And that is what needs to be corrected as far as the false narrative. These are not victims. These are victimizers.
Yes, unfortunately.
Right? Because they do not care about, if they care, then they would work on themselves in such a way that they would maintain and fulfill their promises. But no, they have to do them. They have to be true to themselves, forget anybody else, and it leaves then injured and lifelong injuries in their wake, leaves the injured parties, which are the spouses and the kids. So Udo, thank you. And we will be back on the second part to go in even more in depth into the fallout of what happens when these men decide to be as selfish as they are. And
Thank you.
Brad, thank you as always.
Thanks, John. There is lots more to come as Uta Hagen, trans widow and author, has more to her story. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Thanks for being here, everybody. Remember, you can find us on BitChute. Just search bitchute.com for Unmasking the Trans Movement, and up we'll pop. You'll also be able to head us online at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. All of our videos are there. As well, you can find everything you need to know to help yourself, your kids, and even your own parents who are kind of confused with this trans agenda too. I'm Brad Wilder. Till next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.